Hello film fans and welcome to this episode of the Sherlockian. Now, I wonder if any of you saw my video on the prehistoric planet, the overall series review I mean. In that I said that I really liked the series and I really enjoyed it, and about the only thing I said I thought could have improved it was if they'd added in at the end a kind of spoof making of section. You know how on things like Planet Earth and Blue Planet, they often have at the end that small little section that shows them how they filmed a particular sequence. You know, it all cut to, some poor producer in the Andes somewhere, and she'll be shivering in a hole in the middle of a blizzard saying, "Oh yes, we're very excited to be here. I mean, the weather, could be better, but we're hopeful we might be able to start filming the chinchillas in a few days." And, then it cuts to some, grumpy cameraman who's going, "Oh yes, we're very excited to be here. Oh yeah, it's a shame the animals haven't turned up, but apart from that, things couldn't be better." And then, it goes on from there and it shows you them filming the sequence. Well, I jokingly said that I thought it would have been really funny if in Prehistoric Planet they'd actually created some of those at the end, mocked them up and used some of the animators as, pretend cameramen. And it would have been nice to, show a spotlight on the people that actually created the series. And I just said that as a bit of a flippant joke. And then I remembered, after I did my Walking with Dinosaurs review, I suddenly remembered that actually there was a series that did exactly that. So this is my review of Walking with Dinosaurs Sea Monsters, in which the naturalist Nigel Marvin pretends to go back in time on his vessel, the Ancient Mariner, and film various, sea monsters. Sea monsters pretty much sums it up. It can be anything that lives in the sea. He basically goes back to 7 time zones, what they, rather, euphemistically call the 7 deadly seas, and he basically films a specific animal or series of animals in those time zones. So, for instance, he'll go back to, say, the Cretaceous and film Mosasaurs, or the Jurassic and film Dipleurodon, or the Ordovician and film an orthocone. So it gets around a bit, certainly. And it doesn't explain ever how he gets back in time, which is something I quite like. It just, says he's gone back in time, and then it cuts to him filming stuff. Now, what did I think of this series? Well, I really enjoyed it. I really thought they played around really well in an entirely, tongue-in-cheek kind of way with the idea of time travel. Not only in the way, as I just said, that they go back in time an awful lot. It doesn't seem to have any effect on them at all, or their budget. But they also... the way they interact with these animals is quite funny. So, for example, Nigel Marvin is the kind of, Steve Irwin, Steve Bachtel type of bloke that says, "Oh yeah, I can see a croc over there. He looks a bit unhappy. I'm just going to jump in and say hello to him." Not that Nigel Marvin is Australian, but it's that kind of thing. Apparently Nigel Marvin has actually swum with great white sharks. So I suppose after that, going back in time and swimming with Dipleurodon is pretty much standard fare, really. So, I do quite like in the last episode, they say that, the seas of the Cretaceous are so dangerous, so full of, sharks and strange fish and mosasaurs that he can't possibly go swimming in them. And then, halfway through, he goes, "Well, I've just got to jump in with them." And he does, and nearly gets eaten. And you sort of think, I thought you weren't going to jump in with them. and then you think back and think, hang on a minute, what's so dangerous about the Cretaceous that you haven't already done? I mean, you were swimming with Dipleurodon in the Jurassic. I mean, they're, in this series anyway, completely massive. What was so safe about the Jurassic that the Cretaceous is suddenly more dangerous? But anyway, I digress. What I particularly like as well is the fact that, despite the fact this is kind of, early CGI animation, it doesn't really let them get them down, if you see what I mean. I mean, you can tell in a lot of scenes that, Nigel Marvin isn't actually diving, with that, ichthyosaur. You can see, particularly when it has to interact with him, you can see it a little bit, it's a little bit ropey. Often he'll be watching something like a pterosaur fly by, and his eyes will follow it, but his eyes aren't quite in the right position. Or that it's a perspective sometimes, particularly underwater. You sort of think, nah, that Donodon hasn't actually gone past Nigel. He's just, been told to look there, and it swims past him. But it's kind of charming for that very reason, because, I mean, we know he hasn't actually gone back in time. I mean, the BBC's budget would, never allow for, 7 episodes of time travel, but it kind of allows you to play along with it, and you're just like, yeah, I mean, why not? And I do quite like, particularly his interactions with the crew. I think, again, that really sort of builds on this kind of comedic element to the series. So, for example, at one point, he falls in with a megalodon, and I mean, he acts as if he's very scared. And to be honest, Nigel Marvin's not a bad actor. He's very enthusiastic. I mean, particularly as when you realise, you think, hang on a minute, most of the time he was just swimming around underwater, and they were saying, right, Nigel, this is where you're going to see the Dipleurodon, or right, Nigel, this is where you're going to ride an orthocone. Considering that, he really acts enthusiastic, as if he's actually doing something really exciting, instead of just swimming around and pretending. And when he falls in with a megalodon, he calls the crew, who he blames, completely irrationally, as far as I can see. I mean, it's him that decided to stand next to the bait, ball thing where they're trying to get the shark to jump up and grab it. he calls the person in charge of it an idiot, which I really enjoyed. Another point there, in fact, earlier not that episode, because some of the different sequences are cut across different episodes, but earlier in the Megalodon sequence, there's a bit where he says caution had begun to set in amongst the crew, and Nigel says or he thinks they should go straight out to save time and just find a big Megalodon straight away. And he's got this Australian captain in charge of the boat, and he says, "No, I think we should stick around with the smaller ones." And there's somebody else, there's quite, another Australian goes, "Yeah, I agree, I think these smaller ones are a bit, Nigel." And I don't know why, it just really makes me laugh, as if they're going, "Well, if you want to get yourself killed, you pommy idiot, you're welcome to try, but personally, I'm going to stay with the small ones." And it really adds to the idea that they're a team who've gone back in time. They don't always agree, there are bits of kind of, friction between them, and they never last very long, And it just seemed that the whole crew was having a really good time making the series, which is great. And, I didn't criticise, but I said, some of the CGI is a little bit ropey. But actually, some of the other sequences are gorgeous. There's a brilliant one, the one with the Dipleurodon in particular. He goes underwater and films them at night feeding on a fish carcass. Is absolutely incredible. It looks really good, and it really emphasises. I mean, obviously, now scientists don't generally think that Dipleurodon was as massive as the Walking with Dinosaurs series portrays them as being, but nevertheless, it's a really good sequence because it's chilling how these huge creatures are sort of tearing off these great chunks of meat. All the while Nigel's swimming around them, filming them, and it's all really spooky and dark. And considering that Dipleurodon was probably the sea monster they'd shown the most in Walking with Dinosaurs, the fact that they actually managed to get something really, new and interesting in the way that you see it, it is really clever of them, and something that they should really be congratulated for doing. Also, I mean, some of the other scenes are also really beautiful. There's a scene where sort of an early ichthyosaur in the Triassic, which looks a bit more lizardy than later ichthyosaurs do. It begins to sort of circle Nigel underwater in this beautiful, clear kind of Caribbean-esque waters, and again, that's an absolutely gorgeous sequence, and it keeps coming closer and closer to him, and there's sort of a bit of tension, but also it just looks amazing, and it's so long, and it's almost like it's coiling around him, and that is absolutely gorgeous as well. To be honest, some of the other sequences, particularly the one with the Megalodon, you sort of think, I mean, it just looks like a massive great white, which, I mean, to be fair, is what Megalodon looked like, so, they couldn't really change it, but it is interesting nonetheless, I think, or rather, I think it's more interesting when they looked at creatures that you probably hadn't seen before. So, for instance, at one point in, I think it's the Jurassic episode, he's in, he's in the water, sort of swimming around, watching these humongous shoals of fish and trying to find a Dipleurodon. And then, a sea crocodile swims past him, and he has to sort of, tap it on the nose to sort of make it go away. And that's really interesting because it's something you don't generally see. I mean, I think because crocodiles are still around, generally speaking, shows about dinosaurs don't really focus on them very much because, I mean, we all know what a crocodile looks like, don't we? And so it's not very exciting, and also, particularly to anime. Even if it's a Sarcosuchus and it's, huge, I mean, it just looks like a really big crocodile. So to see an actually interesting kind of crocodile, something that we wouldn't be familiar with nowadays, I think that's really interesting. And so it's particularly when they show you those kind of, small, more, interesting creatures, that the series really comes alive. But overall, yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And I think, it sort of proved what I was actually saying on the Prehistoric Planet video. And even though, of course, it came long before I made that video, but it proved that how, fun it can be just to, play around with the concept of, filming dinosaurs. We know that they're not real. We know that they haven't actually gone back in time, but it's just exciting to watch people film them. And of course, because it's not real, you can make the presenter actually do things that you could never possibly do in real life. I mean, when you consider that the Patagonian authorities no longer let you, lie down in the surf on that beach where the killer whales come in and grab sea lions, like they did in Trials of Life, because they quite rightly consider it to be, a disaster waiting to happen. There's no way the BBC would allow its film crews to go, oh, that's a massive, 25-foot long reptile. Certainly you can go and swim with it. Yeah, I'm sure that won't incur any risk assessments at all. But because obviously it's CGI, they can do what they like, can't they? So it makes it, for almost a more entertaining documentary, because you can do stuff you'd never ever be able to do in real life. So yeah, that was my review of Walking with Dinosaurs Sea Monsters. Thank you very much for watching, film fans. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.